30 times. That's how many times police cruisers rolled into my driveway in 4 months, lights flashing against my porch like my house was a crime scene. 30 times I stepped outside with my hands open, moving slow, because when the law shows up, that often one wrong gesture can turn into a headline. And on call number 30, the complaint said I was a terrorist for obstructing a road that didn't even belong to the HOA. It belonged to me. I didn't buy the house at 1847 Ridgeview Drive because it was pretty or because I wanted some quiet little mountain neighborhood to fade into. I bought it because it was a puzzle, and I've never been able to walk away from a puzzle, not after spending 23 years buried in federal paperwork chasing fraud that most people don't even know exists. The house was older than the subdivision around it, weathered cedar siding, a porch aimed straight at the sunset like the builder had planned his whole life around golden hour, and it came up in a federal auction listing buried so deep in a database you'd have to be half obsessed to find it. Most people saw a weird old house in a difficult neighborhood. I saw an original deed, a 1962 federal easement survey, and a private access road that had been quietly swallowed by a development like a snake swallowing a rabbit, slow, deliberate, and meant to disappear. I paid cash. No mortgage. No bank to pressure me when things got ugly. Things always get ugly. The moving truck backed in at 7:47 a.m., and I was hauling boxes, heavy ones, mostly books, codes, regulations, old case law when I heard the clicking. Not birds, not branches. Heels. Click, 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 like the soundtrack to someone who believed the world rearranged itself on command. She stepped out from between 2 manicured hedges like she'd been waiting there all morning. Light blue blazer, sharp enough to cut paper silver hair, sculpted into something that would survive a hurricane, eyes cold and pale like winter glass. Behind her, 4 HOA men in matching navy polos moved in formation. Briarstone Highlands, HOA stitched in gold like they were a private little army. She didn't smile. She didn't introduce herself. She just pointed at my front steps like I'd walked onto her stage uninvited and said, "You're trespassing." I laughed one short, disbelieving sound because I was literally holding a box labeled kitchen. "Ma'am, I'm moving into my house." She didn't blink. "This property is designated conservation land under HOA jurisdiction. No residential development has been authorized. You need to leave. 24 hours. The way she said it, calm, clipped, practice told me she'd done this before. "And you are?" I asked, even though I could already taste the answer. She lifted her chin like she was being crowned. "Diane Whitford, president of the Briarstone Highlands Homeowners Association." Then she leaned slightly closer like she was doing me a personal favor and added, "If you don't vacate, we will involve law enforcement." I felt that familiar tingle at the base of my neck, the one that shows up when someone lies with absolute confidence. "Interesting," I said, "because I have a clear title, an original deed and federal documentation that says this house has never been part of your HOA. Her left eye twitched, tiny, quick, but there. A crack. "Our records show otherwise," she snapped. "Then your records are wrong." Another voice cut in gravelly and amused, like it had been sharpened on truth for decades. "Diane, you're embarrassing yourself again." An old man shuffled over from next door, had to be pushing 90, but his eyes were sharp enough to cut glass behind thick lenses, and he carried a walking stick like it was older than the neighborhood. "Name's Walter Payton," he said, offering a weathered hand. "County surveyor for 34 years. Welcome to the neighborhood. Don't let the welcoming committee chase you off." Diane's jaw clenched so hard I thought her teeth might crack. "This doesn't concern you," she snapped at Walter like he was a nuisance on her property. Walter chuckled. "Property lines concern me. Always have." Diane turned back to me and gave me a smile that didn't reach her eyes. 24 hours, she repeated, then pivoted on her heel and marched away with her little entourage trailing behind her like ducklings following a venomous mother duck. Walter watched her go and shook his head slowly. "She won't wait 24, he muttered. "She never does." He wasn't kidding. The first cruiser arrived that same evening. Red and blue lights splashed across my porch while I was unpacking tools, and Deputy Aaron Holt stepped out with the kind of exhaustion you don't get from missing sleep. You get it from answering the same calls from the same person for years. "Mr. Briggs," he called. "That's me." He glanced at his notepad like he was being polite, but his eyes said he already knew the script. "We got a complaint. Suspicious activity. Possible trespassing on HOA conservation land. Also, illegal construction." I pointed at the house. "This place has been standing since the early 60s. I bought it at a county auction. I've got all the documentation." Holt sighed, and when he looked past me, his gaze flicked across the street where Diane stood in her light blue suit, arms crossed, watching like a hawk. Holt didn't even try to hide his resignation. "Let me guess," he said, voice low. "Blue suit?" "Light blue," I corrected. Holt gave a humorless laugh. "Yeah, that's her." He rubbed his forehead like he had a permanent headache. "Mr. Briggs, I'm going to level with you. Diane Whitford has filed a lot of complaints, most of them unfounded. But policy says we respond every time. How many?" I asked. Holt's eyes didn't leave Diane across the street. "Enough to run families out. Henderson's lasted 5 weeks. Before them, the Castellanos. 3 weeks. A couple before that didn't even finish unpacking." My stomach tightened. "How many total?" He frowned, doing the math. 11 that I know of. Probably more. 11 families, pushed out by paperwork and sirens and humiliation. Diane didn't want rules. She wanted control. Holt handed me the complaint. I showed him my deed. He nodded. He apologized, and he left. The next morning at 5:47 a.m., he was back. Noise complaint. I was making coffee. By lunchtime, another call. Unauthorized vehicle. My truck was in my driveway. Then suspicious packages. Amazon deliveries, books mostly. More calls. Drug activity. Aggressive animal. I don't own a dog. Unauthorized landscaping because I trimmed a bush. Possible explosives because I bought mulch for the garden. I started sleeping in fragments like a soldier in a hostile zone because any moment could bring another knock, another cruiser, another set of eyes judging me like I was guilty of existing. And I'll admit something I'm not proud of around call 10. I started wondering if I was the problem. Not logically, not legally, emotionally. You know that feeling when the pressure doesn't stop, when it's not one big punch but 1,000 little ones. You start thinking maybe if I just leave, I'll get my life back. Maybe peace is worth swallowing pride. Maybe that's what normal people do. I'd bought this place to be quiet. Instead, I couldn't even pour a cup of coffee without a siren cutting through the morning. I stood in my kitchen one night staring at my unpacked boxes, and I actually said out loud, "What am I doing?" I looked at my front door like it was a trap. I pictured Diane's smile the way she watched from across the street, and I could almost feel the neighborhood's eyes on me waiting for me to break like the others. And for a second, just a second, I thought about calling a realtor, selling at a loss, vanishing. Let Diane win. Then the anger hit. Not hot, not loud, cold. The kind that settles in your chest and locks your jaw. Because if I left, I wasn't just leaving a house, I was handing her another trophy. Another family erased. Another lie made permanent. So I did what I've always done when something doesn't add up. I started documenting. I bought a whiteboard, then a second, then a filing cabinet. Every call went on the board: date, time, complaint type, officer name, outcome. And once I started tracking it, I saw the pattern. Diane wasn't panicking. She wasn't reacting. She was running a system: clusters, rotating categories, vague enough to avoid perjury, specific enough to force response. Bureaucratic torture. Death by 1,000 forms. Around that time, Walter invited me into his study. The place smelled like pipe tobacco and old paper, like decades of truth locked in drawers. Filing cabinets lined the walls, each labeled in fading handwriting. He pulled open one drawer, and it groaned like it hadn't been touched in years. 1962. He muttered, unrolling a yellowed map across his dining table. The ink was faded, but the lines were crisp, professional, permanent. Federal Highway Administration easement survey, he said, tapping a thick line that ran right through what the HOA called Briarstone Ridge Drive. They planned an interstate expansion. Project got shelved, budget got eaten alive. But the easement never rescinded, never transferred. He traced the map with his finger, then pointed to my property. This house, the original deed predates the whole subdivision. And when they built this neighborhood around it, they built it on top of something that was never theirs. My pulse picked up. "Walter," I said slowly, "are you telling me that the private road the HOA uses belongs to whoever owns this house?" Walter's grin was sharp and satisfied. "Belonged to the Holloway family. Now it belongs to you." I stared at the map like it was a loaded weapon. "So the HOA's been collecting road maintenance fees." Walter's expression turned darker. 17 years, he said. 2,300 a household, 52 houses. Do the math. My stomach dropped. Over 2 million. Closer to 3, Walter said quietly. And Diane knows. She found out years ago, buried a report, fired the accountant who asked questions, then doubled the fees and told people it was for repairs that never happened. I sat back like someone had kicked the air out of me. All those sirens, all those complaints. It wasn't just harassment, it was defense. Diane wasn't trying to enforce rules. She was trying to protect a secret. That night I sat on my porch with the map across my knees and made a choice. I could sell and run like the 11 families before me, or I could do what I used to do for a living, build a case so airtight even Diane's arrogance couldn't wriggle out of it. The next morning, call 11 arrived. Suspected weapons stockpiling. I smiled because at that point the game had changed. My garage became a command center. One wall, the police call log, color-coded every pin red for unfounded. Another wall, financial timelines. HOA dues, road maintenance fees, contractor invoices, public records, shell company filings, and in a locked case, Walter's 1962 map. The calls kept coming. Diane escalated. She started sending letters to the neighborhood emergency assessment, $5,000 per house for enhanced security due to criminal elements. The criminal element was me, a guy drinking coffee and owning paperwork. Fake security patrols started rolling by at night trucks with Briarstone security painted on the doors, guys in tactical vests you buy online shining flashlights into my windows like they were auditioning for a movie. I checked state records. The company didn't exist. It was theater. Cheap, desperate theater. And the more she pushed, the more cracks appeared in her perfect little kingdom. A neighbor, a retired teacher named Rosalind Thatcher, knocked on my door one morning, clutching that assessment letter like it was burning her fingers. "Mr. Briggs," she said, hesitant, "Diane says you're dangerous. She says we need security because of you." I looked her in the eye and kept my voice calm because that's how you disarm fear. "Rosalind, has Diane shown you receipts for the road maintenance fees you've been paying for 17 years? She blinked. "She says records are confidential." "Convenient," I said. "Ask her who fixed the road. Ask her to name the contractor. Ask her why the county won't touch it." Rosalind's face shifted confusion, doubt, then something sharper. Anger. She left with questions in her eyes, and I knew that was how it started. Not with a riot. With one person thinking, wait, what if she's lying? Then the real twist walked up my driveway at 9:17 p.m. in a tired old Honda Civic. A woman in her late 30s stepped out looking around like she expected Diane to leap from a bush. She knocked once quick, then held up a USB drive like it weighed 100 pounds. "Cal Briggs?" she asked. "Yeah. I'm Wendy Sinclair," she said. "I used to be the HOA accountant." She swallowed hard. "Diane fired me for disloyalty. I have everything." Inside my kitchen, she spread documents across my table, spreadsheets, bank transfers, invoices. "Briarstone Infrastructure, LLC," she said, tapping a file. "Shell company registered out of state. Diane and her husband are the shareholders." My skin went cold. Road fees go into the HOA account. Wendy continued, voice steady now. Then get invoiced out to the shell company for maintenance services, then vanish into offshore accounts. I stared at the numbers and felt the old part of my brain wake up, the part that used to sit in fluorescent-lit rooms for 12 hours following money trails like footprints in snow. How much, I asked. At least $3.2 million, Wendy said. Probably more. I only got 8 years before she locked me out. I looked up. Why bring this to me now? Wendy's eyes hardened. Because I heard what you did in that federal fraud case years ago, she said. And because Walter told me you actually listened to him. Diane ruined my career. I've been waiting for someone who could end this. That night I didn't sleep. Not because I was scared, because I could finally see the end of the tunnel, and it wasn't light, it was a train. Diane sensed the shift. The calls got frantic. 4 in one night. Suspicious lights, prowler, gunshots, explosive device, all lies, all desperation. And then she came herself at sunset, standing at the edge of my driveway like she was about to negotiate with a hurricane. Light blue suit, of course. Mr. Briggs, she said, too smooth. How much I tilted my head. Excuse me? How much to make you leave, she said like she was ordering takeout. Double what you paid. Triple. I can have a check tonight. I walked down from my porch, slowly keeping my hands loose at my sides, and stopped about 15 feet from her, close enough to see the fear tucked behind her icy eyes. I didn't buy this house because I needed somewhere to live, I said. Her smile faltered. Then why I let the silence stretch just long enough to make her uncomfortable? Because I found something interesting in the records, I said. A 1962 easement, an original deed, and a private road 52 families have been paying you to maintain for 17 years. Her face drained white, then gray, then purple, like her body couldn't decide which kind of panic to pick. You don't know what you're talking about, she hissed. $3.2 million, I said softly. Invoiced through a shell company. Offshore accounts. Contractors that don't exist. A buried report. Diane's throat bobbed. Who told you? Doesn't matter, I said. What matters is I have documentation. The kind that people in federal court find persuasive. She straightened, trying to rebuild her mask, but it was cracking right in front of me. You're making a powerful enemy, she snapped. I almost laughed. Ma'am, I said, voice low. I've testified against men who sat in rooms with flags behind them. I've faced congressional hearings. I've been followed, threatened, smeared, and buried in lawsuits. Do you really think your HOA scare tactics are going to work on me? Her eyes flashed. This isn't over. No, I said, and smiled without warmth. It's not. But not the way you think. The next morning the survey crew arrived, 3 trucks, yellow vests, professional equipment gleaming in the early light. Marcus Jennings, a contractor I trusted from my old life, had assembled the kind of team that measured twice and cut once. Tripods went up, cameras clicked, stakes went into the ground. Diane appeared before the first tape measure, even snapped tight, dragging her husband and 3 fake security guys like a last pathetic show of force. This is private property, she screeched. The lead surveyor didn't even look up. Ma'am, we've been contracted by the property owner, he said, calm as a man reading a grocery list. And according to the deed filed with the county, he owns every inch of road we're standing on. Diane froze. That's impossible, she whispered. I handed her a certified copy my attorney had prepared overnight, clean, official, undeniable. She snatched it, read it again, and by the 3rd time her hand was shaking so hard the paper rattled. This is fraud, she spat. You fabricated this. I shrugged. Call the county recorder, I said. They filed it yesterday morning. Her husband pulled out his phone, face already turning pale as he listened to whatever confirmation he was getting. Around us, neighbors spilled onto porches, drawn by the commotion like moths to a flame. Rosalind Thatcher pushed through the crowd, eyes wide. What is happening? She demanded. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't need to. Your HOA has been collecting road maintenance fees for property. It doesn't own, I said. 17 years, millions of dollars. A murmur rolled through the crowd like wind through dry leaves. Diane turned to her husband and screamed, "Call the police!" He did call someone, just not who she expected. At 11:42 a.m., 3 black SUVs rolled in federal plates, men in dark windbreakers moving with coordinated precision. A woman stepped out of the lead vehicle, calm, focused eyes like she'd seen 1,000 liars and never been impressed by one of them. She walked straight to Diane and flipped open a badge. "Diane Whitford," she said, voice flat. "FBI Financial Crimes Division. We have a warrant for your arrest for wire fraud, money laundering, and racketeering." Diane's mouth opened, but nothing came out, just air like a fish out of water. Agents moved in on her husband. Another team headed toward her house. The cameras clicked again, but this time they weren't survey cameras, they were federal evidence photos. Diane finally found her voice, but it was a shriek. "You did this?" she screamed, pointing at me like her finger could rewrite reality. "You ruined everything." I stepped forward just enough for her to hear me over the stunned silence. "No," I said, steady. "You ruined it the moment you decided lying was easier than leading. All I did was document what you did to everyone else." The agent, Claire Ashford, that was her name, took Diane's arm, firm and professional. "Ma'am, you have the right to remain silent," she said. "I strongly suggest you exercise it." The handcuffs clicked into place, silver against light blue, and Diane's face collapsed. Not a crack, a collapse. The woman who'd ruled this neighborhood with paperwork and fear stood there in front of 52 homeowners, powerless, reduced to a trembling mess in designer fabric. And as they walked her toward the SUV, I saw something I didn't expect. Relief. Not mine, hers. Like some part of her had known deep down that it always ends this way. Then the door shut. The SUV pulled away, and the quiet that followed felt heavier than any siren. Lesson paper beats power every time if you're stubborn enough to hold the line.